Here we go. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining our podcast, The Stamp of Approval. You know, during the pandemic, I'm providing many podcast episodes with a variety of the very best professionals in the business to help you navigate your life during these uncertain times. You know, you're going to get through this. Create a plan for yourself, your business, and take action. I'm Kristin Stampini. My husband Mark and I own multiple businesses. In 2017, we opened up our virtual assistant business where we help over 100 small business owners hire, train, and staff administrative assistants at a very affordable price. We have a real estate business, and my real estate career began during the financial crisis back in 2007, while I was personally bankrupt and broke. During that time, my husband Mark and I built a $1 million real estate team. And this year, we opened up our own real estate brokerage where we also have a real estate investment company, and I am a real estate coach for the Craig Proctor system. Today, I have my friend and attorney, Hilary Zalman. Hilary Zalman is a commercial litigation and real estate attorney admitted with the Florida Bar. Hilary has been practicing in South Florida for the past 14 years, where she runs a private practice and serves as a special independent magistrate for the city of Boynton Beach. Her focus in law is on commercial and residential landlord-tenant law, as well as real estate closings and title insurance. Hilary is driven by helping her clients to resolve matters and overjoyed to actually be with us today. Welcome, Hilary.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be on your podcast. Thank you.
And I'm so honored to have you. I mean, you are just a wealth of information and so awesome to every client that I've ever worked with you. And I appreciate that. And of course, we are clients. So we're going to cover so much today. You know, we're going to talk about rent. We're going to talk about the courts. We're going to talk about, so I'm not going to tell you all of that. Let's just jump right into it. So on a residential side, Hilary, and, you know, feel free to, you know, obviously it's crazy right now, right? Mm-hmm. And you're probably getting questions you've never gotten before, and you're having to figure out how to help so many different people in what we're going through today. Correct?
That's correct.
And these are times that we've never ever seen, none of us. So obviously a lot of people out there are asking, do I have to pay rent? What happens?
That's a great question. And you brought up the exact issue the legal courts are going to be dealing with. This is an uncertain time. There's information, misinformation. So the law is going to be affected. Cases, we're not going to know what the outcome is. But the quick and easy answer with do you have to pay rent, there's absolutely no law out there. There's no federal or local law that says you do not have to pay rent. Or if we're going to talk about, I guess, residential, but this will even apply. We can talk about commercial after. But there's no law that currently says you don't have to pay rent.
Okay, so as residential, if I can't, obviously, you know, with all the help and the government help out there, and we're, you know, it's April 13th, 2020 right now, and I don't really know anybody who's received any money yet. Okay, do you know people that received money yet?
That's funny that you asked. I've only heard of one person who received one of the SBA loans, and it went through a small bank. That's the only person I heard. I'm sorry, did not receive money. It was approved. I don't know anyone that's received any money for anything yet from the government. That includes the check that's direct deposited or the SBA loans yet.
And so we've been closed down basically as businesses for what, close to a month now?
Yeah, it started, right. It's almost a month.
Right. So people are not receiving any money. So obviously with not receiving any money, people aren't going to be able to pay rent. So what happens?
So what Governor Ron DeSantis did, he's issued a few orders, or we'll call them, what did he call them exactly? I have it written down here. The last order is an executive order number 2094. Now this one applies to what we're discussing today. It puts evictions, the cause of action of evictions on hold or suspended for 45 days. So like you and I have talked about before, the day you don't pay rent, a cause of action under the law arises for the landlord to sue you for eviction. And all the government has done is not stop the eviction, but suspended that cause of action for 45 days, so into May. So it's on hold. So if you are forced into a position where you're not paying rent, ultimately if the landlord wants to evict you, as soon as this order expires, unless another one comes out, that's when the eviction can start.
Okay, so there is nothing out there that gives me where I don't have to pay rent then?
No.
Because people were saying that you don't have to pay rent. And we're talking about residential, okay, right now.
It's complete misinformation. My best advice for the residential tenants, and I'm getting a lot of calls for residential and small businesses, is, first look at your lease, but a residential lease most likely is not going to have any provision on this, is to reach out to the landlord and work something out. This benefits both the landlord and the tenant because, you want payment to come forth. So you have options. You can say, look, can I defer rent? If they say no, can I apply my last month now? Can I apply perhaps my security deposit now and repay it over a payment plan in the future? Can I defer March, or April? That's probably April and May. So there's options, but whatever you agree upon, you have to get in writing, both sides. Because I'm getting calls where we made a verbal agreement, now the landlord wants to take it back or vice versa. It has to be in writing. The leases are writing, and the only way to change the lease, that's your contract, it still applies, is with another writing.
Okay, can I just write it on a piece of paper, or does it have to be a addendum, or can it just be?
It can be, if you can't get both parties to sign, at least get a very strong email where both people are saying, do you accept this offer? Yes, I agree. And everybody has that. But really the best is if you could get a piece of paper. It could be a piece of notebook paper, and you get everybody to at least initial it would be great if possible. That's obviously the best, but I understand that's a difficult time. If the landlord could send over an addendum, the best. I would say, can you just please send over an addendum so there's no confusion that we're participating in this payment plan? And everybody's home and in front of a computer. I don't see why a landlord can't do that.
What do you foresee, since there's no evictions for 45 days, don't you see that the courts are going to be backed up then?
I definitely see the courts, the courts are still partially online, partially suspended. So in some of my cases, I'm still getting orders. I think the courts may be a little backed up, but even more so the sheriffs. The sheriffs are going to be completely inundated if it gets to the end, which will buy someone some time. The eviction process won't go as fast as normal. However, the process will still go forward. So my fear is tenants are going to be completely blindsided, thinking these are not like foreclosures from our years past. They're not going to be sitting there for a year. Instead of taking 3 weeks, it might take a few extra weeks or a couple months, but maybe not. I think once that process starts, you need to be prepared to be evicted.
So your biggest thing is basically, if you can pay rent, don't stop, obviously. Number two,
Yes.
If you can't, try to really work something out as opposed to paying nothing, maybe,
Right.
Okay. And maybe you can pay whatever, $500 this month, and then you can, spread it out, right? So there can be things that are done.
Right, definitely. Or be mentally prepared that you can be evicted. And once an eviction's filed, it's not supposed to work this way, but it does affect your ability to re-rent in the future. Even if you win or settle it, it can come up on a background search, and then you have to explain it in the future when you're re-renting. So if you can avoid that, great. If you can't, okay, this is an unusual time, but at least be mentally prepared on what you're going to do.
Okay, so when will they start the evictions again?
So what's very interesting is the governor has issued an executive order. Then each court has their own order, and which is online. I've checked Dade, Palm Beach, and Broward, and they're each treating this a little differently. For example, the courts are allowing lawsuits to be filed, but maybe they're not entering default, this or that. We don't have to go into each court now. But each court will be handling this completely differently within their own order. So there is no blanket answer. I will tell you this, and I didn't mention this. In Governor DeSantis's order, the evictions are suspended for 45 days for non-payment of rent. If you default for another reason, and a lot of people may not catch this, you can be evicted now. The sheriffs are still on hold, but you could technically, that order won't apply. So if you're in default for something else, I would definitely
give us an example.
There's a lot of reasons to be under default. You're not in compliance, maybe with your lease, with association rules and the bylaws. You're doing something that's caused a lien on the property. You're housing multiple animals against your lease, and you've received the paperwork from the landlord telling you you're in default and you haven't cured it. Anything where you've received paperwork to cure and you haven't cured it. These are problems. These are issues that are in addition to not paying rent. You've done a crime, anything that's in breach of any other provision of the lease. You can be evicted sooner. Besides the non-payment of rent, yes.
Wow. Okay, so it's kind of crazy because things change, things keep changing, and then you have to interpret it as well, right?
Right. And I was speaking to a colleague this morning about that, and the problem with interpreting it and going, Hilary, maybe this will happen if we fight it, maybe this will happen, is that when things are uncertain, the uncertainty means legal fees, and you don't want to sit and pay legal fees over things that are uncertain. You want to know that you're a winner. So I would try everything you can to avoid litigation if possible, because this is going to be new law. I mean, I've been practicing this area day in, day out for years and years and years, so I can predict what I believe will happen. But again, this is really an unusual time.
And out of all the attorneys that I know, which I know a lot of attorneys, by far with residential, landlord, and tenant, I mean, you are way above anybody else that I've ever so this is your baby. You are awesome at this part. And so everything that you say, though, is important that people realize that number one is pay your rent if you can, work something out in writing with your landlord if you truthfully cannot pay rent. Maybe, how about if I know that I'm getting unemployment but I haven't gotten the money yet? Should I put that in writing that says, hey, when I get my unemployment check?
Sure. And anything that shows good faith to try to work it out. But at the end of the day, these leases, these are contracts that are you're still bound by this contract. And, if you breach it, it is a breach. Yeah. And so you're hoping to work something out with both parties. And you could tell the landlord too, if you kick me out, who's coming in? So, yeah. I really have the good faith to try to make this work.
Okay, and what about, you were talking about the police are going to be backed up. So what happens after an eviction? What happens when somebody's evicted? Then what? Why are the police involved?
Okay, so basically once you go through the court process, actually before the court process, first, I would tell anyone that's a renter out there, first, if you get a notice on your door, any kind of notice to pay rent or that you're in default, take it seriously, because the landlord may intend to do some kind of litigation. That doesn't go to the court at first. That's just a notice to you. It might be 3 days to cure, 7 days to cure. Now remember, you have the governor's hold order, but still, take it seriously. If you don't cure it by that time, the landlord might file an action to the court. It goes through the court process. If a judge decides to evict you, it takes a few weeks, maybe longer now. It'll be stamped eviction. And then if you don't leave, it's turned over to the county sheriff right away. The county sheriff gets a writ. It's called a writ of possession. And they're going to post it on your door and let you know they're coming to change the locks with the landlord and remove you. It includes all your possessions. Again, this process is going to take longer than normal, but it's not going to be comparable to a foreclosure process.
And how long does that take?
On a normal eviction through our office, we say around 21 days. Now it's anyone's guess how long it's going to take.
Wow. So you could buy time if you were really planning on moving, not paying rent or whatever, which obviously we don't recommend, but you could probably buy a good couple months, right? 3 months, maybe.
Right. And again, right now, it's on hold at least through mid-May. So nothing is going to be moving forward with the Sheriff's Department for 45 days from April 2nd. I think that hits right through mid-May. So this is a good time to think about your options.
And are the courts open? So you said it depends on the county. They're all a little bit different.
Right. For the courts are open for limited, very limited cases. They're really not set up right now to hear eviction hearings for the most part, unless it's some kind of urgent order. You have something very unusual going on in the tenancy, and a judge may set aside a virtual hearing to hear that. I think they definitely would. But for the most part, these are going to be just on hold through mid-May.
So it's just going to totally back up the courts.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the commercial side. So if I am renting space, now we're looking at, potentially 35% of small businesses not being able to recover through this, right? And also the businesses that are working from home, they're sitting there going, wow, I'm working from home. We're just as productive, and maybe not paying for commercial space is the way that we want to go, because we're seeing that it works really well. So there's a couple of different scenarios. What do I need to do? What are the laws?
If I was a small business, I'd go through about 4 steps. The very first thing I would do is I would pick up my commercial lease. Every commercial lease is different and has a different force majeure provision, which may or may not apply to COVID-19 depending on how it's worded. I would look at that provision. Some of them in these commercial leases will say, if applicable, your rent is deferred. You're not in default. It's great. So first I would see what you think your rights are. Very important. Pick up your commercial lease. Second, I would look at your commercial lease and see if you have, which we've talked about, a personal guarantee. If you have a personal guarantee and you default, you know that the landlord will come after you personally. That's suing you personally, your personal assets. So the second thing is, after you get, you have an opportunity to review your lease, I would consider definitely some of these loans. I've spoken to many colleagues, and all of them agree across the board. If you're a small business, you should be looking into the SBA loans for small businesses. The government is practically giving away funds. The payroll protection small business loan, even independent contractors, as of last Friday, a loan was released to them. And a lot of these loans are supposed to be forgiven in part. I would speak to your CPA or accountant for that. I know you're having a guest speaker on that.
And he'll talk about all of this.
Yeah, all the viewers, I definitely recommend you watching Wednesday on this. It's very important. So now you've looked at your lease, the force majeure. You look to see if you have a personal guarantee, which you know. You look into loans. And there was one other loan too, and I'm not sure if it still has funds, but in Florida, for us here, the FloridaDisasterLoan.org was giving away loans at, I think, 0% interest rate. So take a look at that website. So you look at loans, then you go to your insurance. Pick up the phone, after you turn off this webinar, pick up the phone, call your insurance agent and say, by chance, and this goes to landlords and tenants. Maybe you own the building. Do I have all risk insurance? Do I have business interruption insurance? Because all landlords and tenants are required to carry all different kinds of insurance. And if you do, ask them, does any of it cover this time? The business interruption insurance, for example, helps replace lost income and pay for extra expenses when a business is affected by a covered peril. So the question is COVID-19 a covered peril? So I would definitely check with your agent. So, and then finally, after all those things, I would do the exact same thing we've done with the residential tenancies, is reach out to the landlord or reach out to the tenant and say, what can we work out? Let's do an addendum for this time period. And this protects both the landlord and the tenant, because the landlords are not going to want to lose an entire building of tenants. So the tenants have that. Use that to your advantage. They don't want to lose you. And the tenants have a lot of money that might be in deposit with the landlord. They can maybe apply some of that or work something out, a payment plan, to get funds to the landlord. Your landlord also might be receiving themselves loan money and insurance money, which they can then sort of apply to allow you to defer some of these payments. So there's a number of things a small business can do. And I would definitely go through those 4 options first.
So number 1, take a look at your lease, right?
Yes.
And see if there's anything. I know mine is definitely not for us. I mean, doesn't help us any. It's
right.
I'm personally, I'm personally responsible. I can't miss any payments. So I either have to pay rent or I have to try to work something out with the landlord. But look at it, yours possibly could. Talk to your insurance company, right? So I know that I had to get personal insurance when I rented this lease space. I had to get personal insurance. So take a look at that. And like you said, really try to work something out, see if they have anything, to help you or whatever. And then what happens if, let's say, because here in both, we're lucky because Mark and I are the only ones working from our office right now. So we can actually come to our office and work, right? Because it's just he and I. We're not, we're not having anybody else here. So it's okay. But a lot of people are not able to go to their offices. And do they still have to pay rent when they're told that they can't come to the office?
Yes. So it doesn't matter if you're an essential business, a non-essential business, a restaurant open, doing partial deliveries. It governs everyone. So, when you have a pandemic, the issue is not, can you blame the landlord, the tenant? Did the government force the closure of your place, or are you just not going in for safety reasons? Whatever the reason is, again, there is no rule out there that says stop paying rent. So it goes directly to your lease. You have to look at the lease. And it's rough. There's going to be a lot of arguments. People have a lot to say, and I know this might not be on your minds right now, but I want to throw this in. I know everyone listening in the future will probably, when you negotiate your future lease, will look at this force majeure provision. And I don't anticipate, but think about it in Florida for us, for hurricanes. If a hurricane comes as well, and the business is shut down for 2 weeks, you don't want to pay rent for that time period either. So in the future, when everybody negotiates this, you want to have a provision in there that says, hey, if some kind of peril happens, a hurricane, a pandemic, we'll throw that in there. I don't have to pay rent if I cannot operate, if there's no power, or there's orders that we shouldn't be going into business. That should be in all the leases now. Throw that in your lease.
What about will they change commercial leases like that if we try to negotiate? Have you seen that?
For years we've been trying to, if we represent the tenant side, we try to throw that provision in for hurricanes, because it could destroy a business if you have to pay rent and there's no power. And if that provision is not in the lease, you do. So I don't think leases will change that much without the requested negotiation. You hire an attorney and you say, I want to put in, I want to beef up this force majeure provision. Landlords aren't going to throw it in there.
Yeah, of course not.
Right. And then, so as a tenant, you throw it in there, and a reasonable person will agree to work with you on that.
Okay. So now my business is, my sales are down. I know when, our country opens back up that my sales are still going to be down for a long time. I'm working at home. It works much better. So I'm not going to pay my rent. They evict me or whatever else. And let's say I have 2.5 years left on my lease, my commercial lease, but my business is not holding up to be able to support me to pay. So I'm not paying. And I decided now I'm going to just take my business and work from home because it actually has been working great. Okay. Which is going to affect commercial totally. And also, so there's 2 questions I have. Number 1, can I go back and try to negotiate my lease, my commercial lease? Because I know that there's going to be a lot of open space for commercial, properties, once we get through this. And number 2, even in the financial and real estate crisis back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, whatever, you didn't see commercial getting hit. Like I believe that it could get hit through this. Right. So number 1, that's first. And secondly is they say, okay, now you owe 2.5 years of rent. Can they collect that? And how does that work? So those are the 2 questions I have.
You brought up great questions. So the first one, since commercial is unique, each shopping center is different. you have to see what sort of leverage you have. Obviously, if you're the big anchor, which a lot of us would not be, the big anchor in the shopping center, you're going to have a lot of leverage to negotiate probably with your landlord. If you're a smaller business, you might have less leverage. I definitely recommend renegotiating. You need a signed addendum. It needs to be truly a signed addendum, a legal addendum to attach to the lease, signed by all parties.
And I personally, if you were going to do that, let's say that you're just like, my business is affected 30%. Okay. There's no way that I can afford what I could.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, now people are seeing that there's a lot of commercial space out there. So you do go to, you know, the landlord to see if you can negotiate, you know,
right,
the rest of your term. I would definitely use an attorney like Hilary to help you navigate through that. Okay.
Right. Because there's things, right. So these are calls we're getting every day. Like I'm dealing, for example, with a gym, and they're being honest with the landlord. They're saying, look, my business is down this percent. I literally can't pay. So if you don't work with us, if you don't renegotiate, we're out. Or we could work with you on this payment plan. We could apply our security deposit. We could make a payment plan for it back, or whatever it is. And you still have money coming in that way, starting this date. And then it's ultimately up to the landlord to come back, and it's a negotiation. If, to go to your second question, the landlord goes, no, don't care, this is the lease, we don't care if you come and go, we're going to sue you, and you have a personal guarantee, then it's a problem. You know, you'll get sued up until when the landlord re-rents again, because they can't collect double rent. So if you leave May 1st, and you have a year guarantee that expires, you know, for a year after May, or whenever you stop paying rent, they could collect that year from you. But a lot of people have more than 1 year guarantees. They have 5 years, 10-year guarantees. Then, you know, and that's what Emil Fleischer is going to talk about on your podcast. I think you're having him as a guest as well. What options are you going to have? Because obviously, can the landlord now re-rent in this market? Are people going to be renting as faster? Usually you would rent pretty quickly, maybe not now. So this is going to be a big concern. You might have to consider changing your business, bankruptcy, other options like that. Because if you get sued for a big number like that, personally, it's going to affect your life. So you're going to have to then talk to a bankruptcy attorney to see what your options are.
And I believe, how about if somebody tries, let's say I go to an apartment complex and I'm renting and they're going to sue me because I move out early and I still owe the rent, or let's say I'm relocating or whatever the situation, is that the same with them, that they can't collect from two people?
Yes. So, and that happens any time of the year. If you want to break your residential lease, this applies just in general. If you break your residential lease, the residential lease has usually two options. It's around the last page. It'll have a early termination penalty. A lot of them have a 2-month penalty. If you break the lease, you might have to pay 2 months rent, or whatever it says. Some will say it doesn't have a 2-month termination and you have to pay until they re-rent. So again, with the residential, same thing.
But it doesn't even say it in there, everybody. So, because I managed restaurants before and I moved so much, and a lot of people will try to collect double rent. Okay. Just so you know, it happens all the time. So when I would move, because I moved like 14 times in 10 years, what would happen is when I was renting, they were trying to collect double rent. We would actually have people drive by, see that, you know, take a picture, whatever. So it's crazy. So they can't.
That's unlawful.
Yeah.
No.
So they can't in commercial or in residential. You cannot collect double rent. Okay. Awesome.
Now, what you can, just to add to that, yeah, definitely ask them for a ledger. Ask them if they re-rented, put it in writing. You know, if you catch them in a lie, that's big damages. But this is what they can do. They can collect the difference in rent. If you were paying $1,000 per month in rent and they re-rented and they couldn't at the market get 1,000 anymore, they're at 900, they could get that difference, 100 per month, once they started re-renting, all the way through your guarantee. So
yeah. And then, okay, this is another thing. I have my house on the market for sale because, you know, really, honestly, Hilary, even in this market, even in this time, for sellers and buyers, it's still a good time to buy and sell. First of all, there are a lot of people out there that have to buy and sell. Divorce, estate sales, moving into relocation, moving into, nursing homes. And I mean, there's about 7 different people that do still have to buy and sell in this time.
Right.
And then other people, are still wanting to buy and sell at this time. Now here in Florida, currently, things changing daily, for real estate, we are an essential business. However, we can't meet people face to face, buyers and sellers, right? So if I am selling my place as a seller, if I have it on the market, do I still have to show it, for example? And is there any legality of having to worry about somebody coming in and I am showing it and they say, oh, I got the coronavirus because I went through your house. So, or what is it?
Right. Yeah. That's a great question. And our office is flooded with questions. Same thing. Just like, I don't have to pay rent. No, that's not true. You have to pay rent. I don't have to close anymore. There's the coronavirus.
Oh yeah, I want to know about that too.
Right. Okay, so I'll start there. There's again, how is the coronavirus preventing you from closing? Legally, I understand you don't want to travel, you don't want to do this, but the banks are open. It really has to be a legal reason to prevent the parties from closing versus extending the closing date a little bit. So the same thing. If you're in a contract to close, I would assume you have to close unless you're spoken to an attorney and they give you the legal reason you don't. If you are a seller and you are contracted to sell, then you have to be able to show the property. I would argue, and again, there's no cases with this yet, that as long as you make reasonable accommodations to show, you could, and this will be a case-by-case basis. For example, if you're still living at home and you're very fearful of showing, obviously you don't want 10 people coming in and out. You can make very strict requirements. You can require people to wear masks and gloves. You could extend your closing date and say, look, we need to extend this. I have people here that can't be exposed at all. So we negotiate an extension. There's a lot of things that can be done. If you're not living there and the property is vacant, I think there's more argument to allow people to come in and out, and inspectors and otherwise, one at a time. So, but if you're selling, you can't just say, well, I'm not going to sell anymore. If you're under contract, especially with a buyer, if you have a buyer already, attached. If it's listed, you could pull your listing.
What happens if I'm a tenant? Do I have to show it?
If you're a tenant, and the seller wants to sell, I think there would be a very strong argument if you're living there that you're not going to freely allow people to come in and out of your house. So I would say you would offer a reasonable accommodation. Now, again, there's no law on this yet, but I would say, look, this person that's living here cannot be exposed to COVID-19. I will do a virtual showing. I can show you everything. I can do it live. I can record it. So I can make a reasonable accommodation so you can see the place. That'll be easier for a tenancy than for buying. Or, that's what I would offer and see how it comes back, or agree to an extension.
Yeah, you can even do be talking to the buyer possibly and walking through the house right on FaceTime, things like that. So there are things that can happen that you can do. But I mean, I'm sure because there is no law, but if you went to court, they're going to look back at it and say, hey, I had somebody whose immune system, was compromised.
Right.
So, they're going to have
we're not going to let them die, right? Yeah. But if you're the buyer and seller, I would say, look, as a seller, look, I have a tenant here in a compromised position. We can't let someone in. So we need to circulate a COVID-19 addendum, which is out there, and check mark off an extension of time. And then they might come back and say, but we need to close at this time. And that's when you get into negotiation. But there is a COVID-19 addendum that's been issued, and it has that very clause to extend these time periods.
Right. And it is out there on on FAR. Okay. And the other thing is too, is when people say, is this a good time to buy or sell? Number one, absolutely, it's still a good time to sell. Number one is the buyers out there are all, buyers that need to buy, okay, or, are going to buy. So you don't have a lot of looky-loos in the market today. Number one. And number two is you don't know what's going to happen with prices necessarily. So, you know, a lot of sellers are like, hey, I'm going to have to sell anyways this year. I definitely have to sell. So I might as well sell right, put my home on the market, because if you're getting market value today, why wouldn't you want to sell? Right?
I agree. And you know, companies like you set up virtually, and we've set up virtual notarization now. You don't have to go to an old-fashioned closing. Everything can be sent to you by computer. The closing can happen virtually. You know, the closings can still happen. And if you are happy with the market where it's at, there is nothing to stop you from closing.
Well, and you can work with people like us and like you that do things virtually. So we actually list our properties. We have virtual open houses, okay, which have worked out really well. Instead of having 5 or 10 people through your open house, you might get 1,000 people through the open house because you're doing it through Facebook Live and different marketing techniques. We also have 3D. So when we actually go and take pictures and things like that of your home, we have 3D. It's called like a Matterport or something similar to that, which we put in. So people that are looking at your property, they can actually see it 3D. Then also, because we can't necessarily meet the buyer face to face, what we do is we show them all this first. Okay, you can also ask for an offer and then let them see the property, and you as a seller can decide when you want to close. So we have COVID-19 set up where our business is set up around this to help you sell your property the way that you want to sell it and that you're comfortable to sell it. So we have set that all up.
And the questions we get is, if I do, you know, do enter a contract, say with Kristin, am I going to be able to get the title search, the lien reports? Yes, all those companies are open. Title's running. You know, for example, Old Republic in the state of Florida and everywhere is running. You can still, the municipalities, the cities are open to run the lien reports, to run the permit searches. That's all running. That's not been put on hold. The closings have not been put on hold in that regard at all.
Right. And so there's a lot of different things that we're running our business virtually. We've set up systems and processes to do that. Also, you know, making sure that we have, you know, masks and gloves and sanitizer and everything to make, you know, sellers feel comfortable. And on the buy side, same thing. You know, we can show you the properties virtually and everything else. And then once you want, you know, you're like, oh yeah, this is a perfect property. Number one, you can either see it and we can set that up with the seller directly, because we can't meet you face to face unless it's like unless it's a vacant home, you know, where we have the distance. But number two is that you can put in an offer and then upon seeing the home. So there's a lot of different things, and you just have to make sure that you're working with realtors and people that have all of this set up virtually. Their businesses are virtual. We have spent hours and hours, numerous hours, and I know you have too, Hilary, of setting up our businesses virtually so that you guys are very comfortable through these times. Okay, because we are an essential business still. So it is still time to do, but there's ways to do it to keep very safe as well.
Associations are still issuing estoppels. Lenders are still issuing loans for purchase sale. So
are you seeing associations put back though time frames? So there's time frame supposed to be within 30 days or whatever. Are you seeing them pushing that back?
I've not seen that. We have not seen that, just to blanket. So we haven't seen any delays from the association or management side or title or lien search side. We have seen some buyers and sellers just doing their own extensions to allow, if extra time needed, to say, okay, we're not going to default you if you need extra time to get this or get that.
So are you seeing people much more flexible because escrow deposits are at risk? Are you seeing, you know, because I think if you go after an escrow deposit, it's probably going to be a little bit harder maybe through these times, or no?
Well, what I've seen, well, also being a litigation office too, which is our, you know, the left hand, I get a lot of calls from sellers saying, my buyer has walked and there's no reason. And so then they've got this deposit there. What do we do? And the seller's going to say, well, I'm entitled to it. The buyer's going to say, no, I'm entitled to it. It's COVID-19. So, there's these deposit disputes for closings that were supposed to occur maybe at the end of April or beginning of the end of March and the beginning of April.
Has any decision been made from them yet?
None of them are in the courts now because the courts are not going to hear those matters yet. So they're all going into mediation. I think a lot of people claiming the deposit are making erroneous decisions. Again, like we talked about earlier, they're thinking strongly, I can walk away from any contracts, like I can walk away from a lease because of the coronavirus. And again, that is, in my opinion, not at all accurate unless it literally states something like that in the contract.
Well, obviously, if you've lost your job, they're not going to give you the loan, okay? And they are going to check, depending on the lender, they're going to check either the day of closing or, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 days before closing. So if you don't have a job at the time, then that's going to happen where you're just not going to get the loan.
You brought up a huge point. A lot of these don't have financing contingencies in the contract. So the argument is that it wasn't based on financing or they didn't check mark that. And so the buyers don't necessarily have an out. That you just pinpointed the big argument.
Right. And so anyways, there's just a lot out there. My recommendation, I'm sure Hilary, is try to work it out. Try to be flexible through these times. Try to make it happen. Don't, if you're a buyer and you can still buy, know that your escrow can be at risk, right?
And I'm still on the financing thing. If you're, the stocks have changed, everything's changed. Your retirement might have temporarily gone down. The market has changed. That changes your financial position to close. Definitely a possible legal argument, depending on how you worked out your contract, if there's a financing contingency or whatnot. You could argue the coronavirus has impacted my ability to buy this home. It's a direct, result. So yes, I don't think you should throw that argument out.
Okay. Is there anything else that you're seeing out there that you want to mention today, or did we cover a lot?
I think to avoid what a lot of our clients are dealing with is if before you default on your purchase sale contract or before you default on your lease, try to work it out. Try to work it out either through an attorney or directly, through yourself if you can't get an attorney, but try to avoid the dispute. Don't break these leases and contracts if you can't. If you have no ability to control the situation, I understand that. But if you have the ability to use this time to negotiate, please, before you default, at least try to reach out to an attorney and reach an agreement. Because once you're in default, the remedies go into play.
And when you're trying to work with people, you don't necessarily go, you try to work things out where a client isn't going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for an eviction unless they have to. You try to work it out through letters and things like that first.
100%. Sometimes through a series of a few phone calls or a letter, and followed up by some emails, can try to work out the entire issue before it gets out of hand, before people have spent money out of pocket. That's the best result, is to avoid sitting here paying legal fees in your breach and trying to make arguments after the fact. Well, I didn't do this because. Try to get ahead of the problem.
Well, and plus financially, somebody who's hiring you, it's a lot less expensive to do it that way, right?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, you might need an attorney for an hour's time, to just help out, interpret something for you, get on the phone with you, versus litigating over several months. Again, we want to try to avoid that. That's what we want to try to avoid. That's why we're doing these podcasts. And you may not have an option still, but if you can, I would try to avoid it.
And how many times do you, because I know you do a lot of getting through this way as opposed to litigating. And I mean, what do you even know the percentage, like a lot of the times where you can work it out between people?
Oh my gosh. Well, when, litigating things over like security deposit disputes and things like that, or small amounts of rent, I would say over 90% are resolved, never need to go to court. If you fail to pay rent, once you fail to pay rent, and if you haven't reached out, those a lot of times do turn into evictions almost every time. But if you try to catch it in advance, there's a time to work it out.
And if you have to hire somebody like, which I highly recommend, Hilary and her team, but if you do, it could cost you a few hundred instead of a few thousand. Okay.
Oh, 100%. A few $100s. That's it.
What's that?
A few $100s. Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
A little bit of time.
So how can somebody reach out to you if they want to talk to you about how to navigate and hire you through this?
First of all, don't charge for phone calls. Feel free to call our office if you have any questions. We're on the website, zalmanlawfirm.com. You can look us up. Also, you can Google Zalman Law, and our website will come up with a lot of questions on evictions especially. You can call me. We can post our number, right? Maybe after this or something like that. I'll put my link, once it's posted, I'll put my link under there with my direct contact. Email is usually the best because I'm always on email and I can respond quickest that way versus the phones, which go through someone else before you hit me. So if you could email me, that would be great. And I will definitely get back to you. I would love to help. Kristin's an amazing source of information on so many areas in real estate, coaching, marketing. I mean, just everything now. So, again, honored to be part of this. And please watch all her podcasts. They really are here to help you. She's really, not only does she do so much charity work, but she's here to help the community. That's why she's doing this.
Yeah, like this week we have, I think, 8 between doctors and therapists and CPAs and other attorneys. We know during these times that a lot of you have a lot of questions. We're all here to help you. That's what we're all here for during these uncertain times. And anyways, I'm going to, leave all of Hilary's information down below so you can get it. But she's a wealth of information. Very awesome attorney that can help you navigate through anything that we just discussed today. And I thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you, Hilary.
Thank you. Remember, you're all not alone. Everybody's going through it.
All of you.
So
I mean,
much.
Us as business owners are all going through it. Hilary, myself.
Oh, me too. All of us are dealing with this exact issue.
Yeah. So don't feel alone because we're all dealing with it. But thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.
You.
Bye.